is the Dr. Deborah Show, and this is the show where we talk about bringing peace and calm into your life. Later in the show, we'll be talking about mental health stigma. We're live at KCSB FM Santa Barbara 91.9. KCSB is a platform for cultural expression and thoughtful discussion, providing a diverse educational forum. And I'm a Santa Barbara-based clinical psychologist, and I specialize in pediatric neuropsychology. And during my clinical training and my current work, I've treated thousands of people, and I want to share my experiences and information with you. I'm also a UCSB alumni, and I live locally in Santa Barbara. And this show's all about our community and how to create compassionate conversations about our well-being and health. Again, I want to welcome our listeners to the Dr. Deborah Show. It's wonderful to have you with us. As a reminder, the show is psychoeducational, and it's in the area of neuropsychology and well-being. It's not meant to replace professional mental health advice or therapy, so if you do believe you suffer from a particular disorder, please do reach out for professional help. And today on the show, we are talking about mental health and well-being with a focus on suicide and recovery. And with our very special guest, Deb Richards. Deb, after she survived an early abusive marriage in her native England, Deb Richards fled with her life and her young daughter for the dream of sunny skies in Los Angeles. And it was there that she met the handsome and successful songwriter Jake Hooker, who was a very successful songwriter who wrote the song I Love Rock and Roll, one of the greatest and biggest hits of all time, according to both Billboard and Rolling Stone magazines. The song has been covered by many artists, including Joan, Jett, and Britney Spears, and created worldwide sales in excess of 30 million records. And Jake also wrote and produced many hits for various soundtracks, including Flashdance, Top Gun, Rocky IV, Iron Eagle, Wayne's World, Charlie's Angels, the movie, Ghost World, and Storytelling, to name a few. And all told, Jake's songs have sold well over 100 million records, or a staggering 1.6 billion in retail sales. Together, Jake and Deb put that dime in the jukebox of life and had a dream marriage where they balanced Hollywood, famous executives, and blending families. And Deb faced a second nightmare when both her eldest daughter and stepdaughter began to experiment with drugs, including crystal meth. And in her debut book, Richards shows how one mother's love and courage shines through despite overwhelming odds. Deb needed her own lifelines after Jake's tragic suicide, and she proves you can always reinvent and shift your thoughts and shine your light. She wrote a book called Shift and Shine. It's a must-read for anyone who has loved an addict or lost someone to suicide. It's an inspiring story of hope with tools to find a path through crippling adversity and emerge stronger and kinder. And Deborah lives in a cottage on 2 acres in Santa Barbara with her dogs and horses. Welcome to the show, Deb.
Oh, thank you so much for having me here.
I'm so excited to hear your story. And Deb, like we were just talking, has wrote this wonderful book, Shift and Shine. So we'll talk about that a little bit. And first, we will talk about mental health stigma briefly, and then mental health and suicide and recovery, and then a bit about prevention and awareness through suicide and recovery. And we're talking about mental health stigma today, and I like to always emphasize this because mental health is the largest public health priority, and it's also the largest financial burden of any health issue in the world. That's according to the World Health Organization and the World Economic Forum. There's a beautiful report that the Centers for Disease Control wrote called Attitudes Toward Mental Illness, and they found that stigma and embarrassment are two of the top reasons why people with mental health issues do not seek help or medication. So I'm always trying to break down those barriers so people can get the help they need. And I also just like to emphasize the idea that issues surrounding mental health affect people from all walks of life. I mean, none of us are really immune from having mental health days, and I like the new way of looking at mental health as kind of like if you had a cold or you hurt your knee, you'd go see a doctor to take care of that. And I like to just briefly describe what I think mental health is. Mental health is like a physiological balance where our nervous system and our thoughts and our heart and our brain are kind of going at a smooth, balanced rate. And I think that gives us a sense of inner peace. I was wondering, Deb, how would you describe mental health?
I think you actually nailed it completely. And I think that the coming to spirituality is the most important component that's been helpful to me. So through all of the social stigma of my eldest daughter's severe ADHD and crippling learning adversities that she went through, and she was really picked on in high school because she was very, very pretty. And we used to think if she had an arm missing or something missing, people could see.
It's true. Isn't that interesting?
They would empathize. But because she looked totally normal, nobody realized the trauma that she was really suffering.
That's so true. Yeah, I love that example. I think that is such a common kind of fallacy, right? That like if a person looks a certain way that
they must be fine.
Right. Well, I mean, everybody has different levels of things going on a spectrum too. So that must have been very challenging for her.
It was very challenging for her. And, you know, as a mother, as I'm sure most mothers would feel, I would have willingly donated a body part to have made her brain the same as everybody else's on a level playing field. But, she continues to suffer to this day because for her, with her disability, when she was 19, she decided that crystal meth was the answer. And she said to me, Mom, that was the first time I felt normal.
Well, actually, kind of, I mean, that's in a way what they almost put in the anti-ADD meds.
Yes.
So in a way, she did get somewhat close. It's just that you don't know what's in that stuff. And also, obviously, that can make your whole life spiral.
It did make hers spiral, yes.
Yeah, there's kind of an epidemic of crystal meth, I think, that's still going on.
And they also said the rehabs, it's much more difficult to get people off of crystal meth because, as you said, they don't know what went into it. Whereas with heroin, there are more natural ways to help treat people.
It's true. When I worked at County Mental Health for several years, we would get people calling in, and I worked for the crises team, so we deal with more escalated situations. And I remember one time we all sat down and looked up, what is crystal meth? You know, what's in the ingredients? And I mean, it's really just like somebody has a bathtub and they put in rat poison. I mean, it's just such a variety of things, like you're saying, you just don't know.
Weird, dangerous things.
Yeah, that's why it is important to check out where you get whatever, you know, you put in your body, because, I mean, it's just like food. I mean, you want to make sure you're getting healthy things.
Absolutely.
And we're here talking, you know, too, about suicide and recovery. And as you can hear, Deb's recovered from a couple different struggles and losses. And I think each one of us does struggle. You know, in a way, it's like we might have a physical, might be financial, might be spiritual at different points. And I think, you know, some people learn to find a better balance. And that's why mindfulness and spirituality is healthy.
So healthy.
So healthy. And I mean, if you haven't ever tried mindfulness meditation, it doesn't have to be a complex process. I think you were even talking about some books you read that kind of helped you.
Dr. Wayne Dyer was one of my heroes and continues to be. Abraham Hicks' piece on suicide I found fascinating.
Nice.
Many Masters, Many Lives by Dr. Brian Weiss was just fabulous. And as a person with a fairly short attention span myself, I came up with a meditation for people that can't sit still for longer than 10 to 15 minutes.
Yes.
Complete with an egg timer.
Nice.
And I put my earphones on and listened to Dr. Jeffrey Thompson, who does the mind sounds.
I don't know him. I'll have to check him out.
Oh, he's fabulous. And they studied the brainwaves of the Buddhist monks when they were in deep meditation, and he has music that helps us all to get to that place much more easily. So I listen to that when I meditate.
think it's very, excuse me, I think it's very hard for people to sit even for 15 minutes. I mean, I have a little brief mini meditation. I've taught thousands of people. Every patient I see, I teach. I've gone in schools, I still do, and teach kids and teachers. And it's really just six steps. And it can take, if you get really good at it, you could do it in like 30 seconds. I know that sounds weird, but if you do it throughout your day,
that sounds awesome.
You know, like the way I was taught by the Buddhists is if you sprinkle that throughout your day, 10 seconds here, 10 seconds there. And it basically consists of just grounding yourself. I'll have to do it one, maybe I'll do a show on it. And then taking in 3 breaths, because the Buddhists are very into 3s. If you can, in through your nose and out through your mouth. Try to notice your heartbeat and thanking your heart for keeping you alive. Thinking of something beautiful you love about nature, I have a mantra I've created, which is I am a loving, beautiful person. You can repeat that 3 times, and then something you appreciate about yourself. And if you're with somebody, thank them for sharing that moment in time, because, right, it's only the moment we have is right now. So
Absolutely.
Thanks for sharing.
Absolutely. And I saw a study that Dr. Dyer reported on when 2 jars of human cells had been placed into a freezer. And one jar was spoken to with negativity and hatred.
Right.
And it turned black and putrefied.
Yep.
And the other one was spoken to with loving kindness.
Yep.
And crystallized into the most beautiful rainbow colors.
Yep.
So if it's that easy to spend a little bit of time sending some love to ourselves.
Exactly.
Why not?
Well, and that's what's critical, I think, for our feeling of well-being is to be loyal to ourselves, which I think people feel that's selfish. My thing I've been saying for the last month or 2 is like, it's not selfish to have self-care, right? Because it's selfish if you're mean to somebody or, you do something that's not nice, I guess, even though we all do those things. I think, though, but if we're intentionally mean. But I think if we're taking care of ourselves, that's not selfish to take some time and enjoy ourselves, and then we can be there for other people.
Absolutely. And also in my very short meditation, I say a prayer for my children and blow them blessings. For my friends, all my Earth Angel friends, blow them blessings.
Nice.
Send love to the Universal Love Bank. So that by the time I finish, you feel like you've sent that energy out into the world.
Well, you've expanded. You've taken on some more levels besides just the meditation. I know I like to do that too. Send out some light to the world. Yeah, it kind of reverberates out too. Well, I think we can spread, Gandhi said, we can spread ripples of peace or we can spread ripples of destruction. And I think it is really healthy, to try to send out, those waves of nice
One
peace.
person at a time.
That's
We
right.
need everyone doing it.
We do. Well, part of my role and responsibility is to kind of dispel stigma. So that's one reason I'm really excited to always do these shows and talk more about how we can break that down. And just if you don't know what stigma is, I know it's kind of a funny word. Maybe we should come up with a new word. But I think that stigma used to mean like a literal mark or spot or scar that kind of was like a shameful trait. But I think stigma really diminishes a person, and then it creates this stereotype or negative view. And I think we have kind of like social stigma or self-stigma. A social stigma is where we have attitudes and discriminating behavior that are directed toward individuals with mental health problems as a result of a label they may have been given. And then there's a self-stigma where the person internalizes their perceptions of discrimination. So, for example, if somebody never had depression and they always thought, oh my gosh, that person over there has depression, I don't want to be like them, then we have it, then we become stigmatizing towards ourselves. The main thing is to allow yourself to be who you are, whatever place you're at, and to understand, too, that I think everybody has things going on. You know what I mean?
Oh, everybody.
So it's just so important to take care of ourselves, to discuss our emotions, thoughts, and feelings within ourselves. And if you're just joining us, we're here with Deb Richards. I'm very excited to have her come on. We're talking about mental health and suicide and recovery. Deb, I was wondering, can you explain suicide and recovery concepts as mental health may relate to them?
Well, for me, for the first year after my husband transcended, I literally couldn't go outside the house, and I immersed myself in spirituality and found that as my cornerstone and my rock. However, I still had the social stigma of my husband's suicide, and I literally could not say the word suicide to anybody. I felt so ashamed, so less than. How could I have let this happen?
See the stigma?
The guilt was absolutely excruciating. And also other people's responses to this could be quite unkind, even though they didn't realize they were being quite so unkind. There was still a big stigma around the word suicide.
It wasn't just the fact that your husband committed suicide and his mental health and his situation also, then it ramified to you and your mental health and the way people related to you because of your loss. Yeah.
In fact, when I first moved up here, a new girlfriend that I made, said to me, don't ever tell anyone how your husband died.
Brutal.
So, yeah, totally brutal.
So glad you came on. Thank you for coming on.
And
you wrote your book, too.
Well, the thing that was the most helpful for me was one of my girlfriends picked me up in her car and over my objections took me to the Santa Barbara hospice and made an appointment for me to see one of the counselors there. Mm-hmm. The most wonderful,
they are great,
experience, the most fabulous counselor. And at first I was so embarrassed to be there because I'm British and we don't easily discuss
That's
our
true.
feelings.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
And so I wanted to have a two-way conversation with her, and she was very patient with me. And we got to the point where I couldn't wait to go in there and sit down and chat with her. Yeah. And she let me know that I wasn't going crazy, that all of these feelings that I was processing through the grief were very, very normal. And I just can't recommend the hospice enough.
And if you're not familiar with hospice, I mean, they serve a variety of people in a variety of capacities. It's free. And I think they do a really beautiful job there. I mean, is there a limit to how many sessions they give you, or is it?
Well, you can keep going until you feel like you've finished.
Nice.
However, after 18 months, there were more tragedies that had occurred in our area. And I just felt like, okay, I think I've got it from here. I should make room for somebody else because there was a waiting list.
You're talking about the debris flow?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, hospice has served a lot. They still are serving a lot of people. Yeah, they do. I mean, what's beautiful is they help. I mean, there's kids that pass away. It's not just people, adults. Grief, I think, comes in so many different forms that, it's not like there's one type of way that grief manifests. And I also think that grief is just a universal experience that we all encounter, and death inevitably touches our lives. And research shows that many people grieve in varying and different ways, from like the textures of their emotions to length of time in mourning, to even the kinds of rituals and remembrances that help heal the kind of irreplaceable loss. It's never easy.
It's never easy. And I in my meditation ritual each morning, I chat to Jake. So he's very much in my heart and with me every single day. And I had someone who came to me and said to me, Deb, my sister committed suicide 5 years ago.
See, sometimes by opening up, other people come to you. Mm-hmm.
And she said, I am so angry at her. How have you come to this place of peace with what happened? And how come your husband sends you so many signs? And I said, well, through my journey on spirituality. I said, but think about it. If you had transcended and the person on the planet is so mad at you, would you want to send messages and come hang out?
It's true. Well, I do think you open up that space. I notice that people, it's kind of, I'm a dream analyst, and I notice as people pay more attention to their dreams, it's kind of similar. As we open ourselves up, the dreams start to communicate with us more and send us more messages. It's like Jake, as you became more spiritually inclined and were more open to him. And I agree with you with the idea, would he want to, or this person come back to the friend who is angry at them? Yeah, it's probably scary for them, especially because they were suffering, obviously, too.
Obviously, and I think when you can get to a place of peace with your loved one's decision, life, your loved one and yourself becomes immeasurably so much better.
In what ways do you think it becomes better?
Because I can think of Jake and send love to him. And there's no bitterness there. There's no, where did my life go? There's love for him.
Nice.
And I tell him, I'll be there in the blink of an eye, baby.
I think that's what he'd probably want too, right?
Yep.
I mean, you kind of get messages that way too.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I think they said that there's been nearly 800,000 suicides reported from 1986 through 2010.
Wow.
And they use 6 survivors per suicide estimate. But I mean, it's believed that actually the numbers of survivors of suicide loss in the U.S. has reached 5 million people. So I mean, there's a lot of people too who attempt suicide. You know what I mean? That don't succeed. And I mean, we don't even include those people. And actually, I do believe, but you can disagree with me because you have your perspective, that I think actually most people have at some point in their life, like, maybe it's momentary, like, I just don't want to be here anymore. Maybe they won't act on it. Maybe they don't have a plan. But, I think feeling like people get to wit's end, so it's just a matter of a couple.
I think the despair is so overwhelming for them that seems like the easiest out right at that moment.
Exactly. It's very, instant.
Yeah.
Deb, I was wondering, from your experience, how do you think mental health and suicide and recovery relate? I mean, I know we just talked a little bit about that, but how do you think, like, by talking about suicide and recovery, that's helped even your mental health? It sounds like
It's helped. The book has helped me so much in that I was so scared to publish it because it was the feeling of, what will everybody think? Oh my God, am I shaming myself even more? And my friend read the book and she said, no, Deb, you have to do this. And so I found that I've given people a place to come to, a safe place, because they know I've been there, done that, and share with me their experiences. And
so sharing is kind of the healing process.
Huge.
Even now, I'm sure it's healing to do that. It seems like.
Oh, absolutely.
I know it's kind of the opposite, though, of what we're taught. Do you know what I mean? It's like what you were talking about 5 minutes ago, is that we're taught, like, okay, don't say anything, keep it all. But actually, it's very freeing, to share. And like you said, people come forward and, yeah.
Yep, they've shared stories of so many suicides, which is so, so tragic. And to be able to hug the parents and the loved one is an absolute honor. And walking through the pain, through the loss of your loved one's suicide is, it's unspeakable. The loss is unspeakable. And you have to take the steps through that loss. There's no shortcut. You have to work your way through it. But as I said before, spirituality has so helped me on my journey,
and
on
then,
my recovery.
And then talking about it and writing.
Talking about it, writing
hearing
about
people's
it.
stories,
letting
loving
people
other people.
know that there's so many people have come to me and said they felt there was no one they could talk to about their loved one's suicide, and they feel they have a very safe place with me to be able to chat, which of course they do. And, it's an honor to hold their hand.
Do you have a website or something that people
I do.
Connect with you on?
It's www.deborahshines.com.
Nice. So if you want to reach out to Deb, we'll make sure to let people know at the end of the show, too. Sounds like, if there's somebody listening that has experienced suicide or is suicidal, maybe
I'm
even help
always here, and we can give my email address as well.
Sure.
So it's been interesting. Also, I've had people come forward and tell me their loved one has gone missing from rehab due to heroin use, and to be able to share the steps that I learned the hard way, so that maybe people don't have to go through the same learning curve that I did.
I love that.
I mean,
like a flow chart.
I did think I should have called the book "Don't Do What I Did."
Oh, well, actually, though, I think each part of it taught you depth. You know what I mean? And helped you sink into the place you got to.
Well, it suddenly, each fall from grace gives you more empathy for your fellow humans' journey.
It's true.
And you lose all judgment.
Yep.
Judgment just goes by the wayside.
Well, that's kind of what we all need, though, really. That would be the healthiest thing for our universe if we could do that. Because judgment, I like to look up the root of different words. In fact, today I looked up the root of the word in my etymological dictionary. Crazy, because I thought, why do people, I always say everybody's a little bit crazy, but, I mean, it was interesting because it did say not well in the mind. So at some point, it was from the 1500s. So at some point, it evolved into, I guess, not being well in the mind, but I think we need a different word too. I guess I think of crazy as like a colorful thing, maybe. Deb, why do you think reducing mental health stigma is so essential?
Oh gosh, it's so essential because there's so many people suffering and they feel so different and so isolated, and they should know that there's a whole plethora of resources for them out there, of people that want to give them huge hugs, of people that want to listen to them, and that they're valued and they need to be here on the planet.
So by breaking down the mental health stigma, that opens up those doors. And I think seeking help actually really reflects internal strength, and is
it does.
It's something really to be commended for, is like an effort toward self-improvement. And that can translate into improved productivity or improved work relationships or friendships, and just a better environment.
Absolutely.
But I mean,
judgment is to judge a fellow human who's mentally suffering is so beyond cruel. It's just...
Well, that's one of the first things I tell my patients is I'm not here to judge you. I'm not here to tell you what's wrong or right or good or bad. I'm just here to meet you right where you're at.
That's wonderful.
That's really what we all need, you know what I mean? Because who needs kind of to be shoved down and told something when we're already suffering?
Yeah.
I think, you know, research has long shown that suicide survivors move through very distinctive bereavement issues, and family and friends are prone to feeling like kind of significant bewilderment about suicide. Like, why did this happen? You know, how did I not see this coming? Or they might have overwhelming guilt. And so I think that's even one more reason to talk about it, because like what you're saying is actually by breaking down the stigma of like what your friends, when someone told you not to talk about it. And also, see, that was very powerful. What did you do to listen to yourself? Did you hear a little voice inside that said, no, I'm going to actually say something? Or did you hear?
Yes, eventually when I felt well enough, a little voice inside me said, hey, if you've been suffering, other people are suffering.
Right.
So this book is not just going to be about what to do if your loved ones are addicts. This is going to shine a light on suicide and I wanted to open up conversations and have a safe place for people to come to.
Nice.
So that they could feel empowered and that they would get through the loss.
Isn't that interesting how through something that was such a tragedy and something that you struggled and suffered, that now you've been empowered? See, that's why I think people are afraid of uncomfortability, you know what I mean? Because, or something new that's very rough and raw. But actually, now that I've practiced a lot of spirituality too, I'm not saying I'm perfect, but I actually move toward those things because sometimes, usually 99% of the time, something really actually powerful comes out of it that's very deep and meaningful. So by allowing yourself to do that. So hopefully if you're listening, you allow yourself to move into your space and place and whatever's going on in your life and try to allow yourself that, you know, time.
And to find someone to share with.
That's true. That's true, to have somebody as an outlet. I think, are you talking about like a friend or a professional or both? Or
Both. Pick up the phone, reach out, whatever it is. Ask on Facebook. There's so many loving, kind, amazing human earth angels out there. But none of us can read what's going on in somebody else's mind.
Although they actually are figuring out how to read thoughts.
Really?
I was watching 60 Minutes. I like that show.
Wow, I love that
weeks
show
ago.
too.
You can look up the old episode if you're interested.
I will.
They were mapping in an MRI certain thoughts, and they'd say it to the person, and they could figure out where they were thinking. So might not be long. I know. I thought that was
That's
pretty
fabulous.
I know. I hear what you're saying. Probably it'd be hard to get the whole kit and caboodle, but there is some sense of that.
Yeah, there is. That would be amazing.
Exactly. Thanks, Deb. I was wondering, Deb, what has your work in the suicide and recovery field taught you about the attitudes that people hold toward mental health?
The attitudes towards mental health, I think, are gradually making progress to being much better than they were, say, when my daughter was suffering 25 years ago. It's much better today. However, there are still people out there who are suffering. There still is the social stigma with it, but there are so many resources to find and to research and to go and talk to about your situation.
As you're out with your book and just talking to more people about your experiences and what you've been through, do you think that people, are receptive? Like when you start talking about mental health, do you think that the attitude is that people are receptive?
Yes. In fact, I led a guided meditation and at the Fest Forums. There must have been about 600 people in the audience. I was absolutely terrified, but it went quite well. Following day, I went back to pick my books up, and about 6 ladies descended on me, and I was like, gosh. And 2 of them had experienced a suicide in their lives. Others had relatives with mental illness, and they were actually thrilled that somebody had written about it. And that was really rewarding. And it was a lovely, lovely moment.
Yeah, to look out and see all those people supporting you too, and then to have the kind of
to have them
reinforcement.
sharing. And it's been such a give and take, because there's so much more mental illness and suicide than I was even vaguely aware of.
And that's one reason actually I'm like talking about suicide. Not that I want people to commit suicide or encourage that. And actually it's a misnomer or misidea that if we talk more about suicide with a person, they'll become more suicidal. It's actually quite the opposite.
Yes.
So if you have someone who's suicidal, it's really healthy to just talk to them about it. But also, I think you're kind of a pioneer in a way, about just breaking through that barrier of, it's okay. And putting yourself out there. But that takes a lot of vulnerability.
Well, it was big social stigma. But in the end, I decided I was doing it for my husband to honor his memory and to hopefully help heal people and help people one human at a time. We had a situation where a young lady in her 40s read the book. I didn't know her. Her mother had mailed it to her down in San Diego. And she's a meth and cocaine addict. And she has been in and out of treatment for many, many years. After reading the book, the most wonderful thing happened. She checked herself into a 90-day program. She said she had no idea the pain she was putting her mother, husband, and children through. And just before Christmas, I received the most beautiful 8-page handwritten letter from her.
Oh, I think I
thanking
saw it on your
me.
Facebook. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was
It's rewarding.
By putting myself out there, warts and all, and saying, hey, I'm far, far, far from perfect, but maybe you'll find something in the story that might resonate with you, is lovely.
Yeah,
That's a lovely
it's like a
thing.
full circle process, too.
Yes, indeed.
I think that society still has attaches such a stigma to suicide, and as such, like survivors of suicide loss may encounter like blame, judgment, social exclusion, while mourners of loved ones who have died, from terminal illness or an accident or old age or other kinds of death, they usually receive sympathy and compassion. And it's just strange how we would never blame a family member for a loved one's cancer or Alzheimer's, but society continues to cast this shadow on a loved one's suicide. And I think what also makes grieving different is that when we lose a loved one to illness, old age, or an accident, we retain happy memories, and maybe we can think back on that loved one and replay those fond memories and share those stories with joyful nostalgia. And I think sometimes for the suicide survivor, that question might think, the person might start to doubt themselves. Were they really good? Maybe he wasn't really happy. Why didn't I see the pain? And it can be very agonizing for loved ones to connect to a memory or share stories from the past. So I think it takes a lot of strength for you. I'm really proud of you for coming and talking about that
Thank you.
and otherwise. So thank you.
Well, for a couple of years, I couldn't have any photographs of him around me, and I really couldn't talk about happy memories. However, I can now, which is
Clearly.
wonderful.
Well, yeah, and you're talking to him, too. He
I
probably
chat to him
appreciates
every
that.
morning. Yes.
I'm sure he enjoys that,
yes,
right?
I think he does.
Yeah, we're all connected still.
Yes, we are.
How do you think someone, with suicide, how do you think suicide and recovery accepts or rejects mental health stigma? Like, how do you think the recovery process, it sounds like it supports mental health
Yes, indeed.
and it's not as stigmatizing, right?
Indeed. I agree.
And then
Yeah.
how do you feel like a person receiving support regarding suicide and recovery? I know you've been talking about some examples. How do you think that could help a person through a mental health crisis?
Oh, I think undoubtedly having a safe space to go and share your concerns, whatever they may be, whatever is troubling you, is absolutely the most important thing you can do for yourself. And, each and every one of us are needed here on the planet. So it's, please go and talk to someone. I actually got my IGALA, Equine Growth and Learning Therapy certification, which is all energy work.
Nice.
And so through that year, when I couldn't do anything after Jake transcended, I would go and work with the, they call them clients, but the patients in the rehab facilities. And I had the honor of hugging an adult man who had tried to commit suicide, and just with tears in my eyes, I told him how much he was needed here on the planet.
Yep.
So that's,
We're all here for a reason. Well, I
Yes.
think that's really important, too, because we have this idea that we all have to be the same. We all have to look the same, have to kind of act a certain way. But, I mean, it'd be really boring if we were all the same.
It really would.
And what makes us beautiful is that we're all different. It's just
Yes.
about embracing who you are. But that's almost a stigma, too, that we have to be a certain, cookie cutter kind of idea.
Well, it was funny. One of my friends was talking about being your authentic self and showing up as your authentic self and how people put masks on.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, since the book came out, everybody knows everything, so there's no masks left anymore.
Well, Freud would talk about, that's what when he would talk about the ego, the id, and the superego. And it took me like 15 years to understand that because I got trained psychoanalytically. It's like the ego, to put it simply, the ego is kind of like the mask, so to speak, we put on, we go out in the world. We put our stuff on and we get ourselves together.
Decorate our lampshade.
Exactly, decorate our lampshade. And the id is kind of like, I would say, like when we get home, so to speak, the mask we kind of take off and let go. And the superego is kind of the mediating force, between those two worlds. But I mean, the main thing is to enjoy yourself. I think to love yourself in whatever you're going through, because it's not going to be, it's not always going to be happy, and it's not going to always be sad. It's a blend of things.
And it's always just a little chapter.
Exactly.
There's another chapter that's right around as you turn the next page.
True. Everything's in flux.
It really is.
Well, and you brought up horses, and actually I was reading in some journals. I mean, horses, if you do have trauma or other things going on, I think horses, and if you're not afraid of horses, I think horses are very powerful because they match your biorhythm, meaning your heartbeat, your respiration, your nervous system. So they're very, very powerfully attuned to, I think, humans and probably other animals and nature too.
Yeah, which is just fantastic. I mean, the Agala works with the wounded warriors, battered women, people in the throes of addiction, and the energy work is just fabulous to see the end results. I mean, we had young teenage boys going through withdrawal, and they were really unhappy to be there with the horses. They thought it was absolutely ridiculous. Mm-hmm. And to see them at the end of the hour starting to come out of their shells was just magnificent.
Well, and horses are so powerful. You know what I mean? They're so like strong and muscular. So I would think.
And it was fun too because we would have different kinds of horses in there, the little teeny tiny mini ponies.
Oh, nice.
And everybody's not scared of the tiny teeny.
Right.
But
the miniatures, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah.
And we would give them exercises to do. And through those exercises, they found out that the mini ponies had more attitude than the big horses. So, size doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's all in the attitude.
Well, actually, there's a lot more people, too, taking miniature horses, like on planes and things, as like service kind of animals. So I think, not that everybody can have one of those. That would be nice.
That would be nice.
I think.
And to just go back to what you were talking about with ego,
Yes.
I love Dr. Wayne Dyer's saying on that, which is edging God out.
Mm-hmm. What does he mean by that?
I think he means that we go to that part of our brain that has the I in it, as opposed to going to the part of the brain where you can think of the we and the wholeness and
yeah, well, that's
your
kind of an
spirituality.
illusion, too, that we set up for ourselves.
Yeah.
Is that it's just me and me and me, and then we kind of excise out everybody. But really, that's just an illusion because we're all here, like, reverberating. I mean, I think we were just talking outside. I mean, the Dalai Lama says we're all breathing in the same air. I mean, even you and I in the studio right now, we're merging a little bit because that's just part of human nature. But it's beautiful, too.
It is beautiful. It's all energy.
Exactly. It's all energy. And I know you mentioned Reiki. Is it Reiki or Reiki?
Reiki.
Reiki. And Reiki is like where you move energy, right? Is that?
Yes. I became a Reiki master after my husband transcended, and it was absolutely beautiful.
Do you want to explain? I love that you say transcended. Do you want to explain just briefly to people what you mean by that? So they know?
Yes. I don't like to say someone died because to me that sounds so final, and it has a period after it. They died.
Yes.
Whereas to say they transcended, to me, they lift up
Yes.
into the heavens, and I think that's so beautiful. And I read a book, I can't remember who it was written by, but it was called The Amazing Afterlife of My Bad Boy Brother. And that talks, it's almost like Jonathan Livingston Seagull in the areas that we go up to after we transcend, and it just really spoke to me. So
Reminds me of the Native American idea. They don't have a word in their language for goodbye.
yeah, I like that a lot.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't like to say with our pets, our dogs or cats, we put our dog down. I think that sounds horrible.
That's true.
I think I like to say we lifted them up.
I like that. We should change that. I lifted them up. It's true.
And also when somebody says,
language.
oh, you know, I, through my own experience, when someone would say to me, how did your husband die? I wish that they would ask me, how did your husband live?
I should have asked you that when I was outside. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. It's programmed in us to do that.
It's true, but I will remember that. So what was say maybe one more time just in case.
If somebody loses someone, if someone transcends, have the empathy to say to that person, how did they live? Tell me about them.
And how did Jake live?
He lived amazingly, magnificently well. He was born in Haifa in Israel. His parents were in the Holocaust. They came over from Poland to Israel, so obviously there was a lot of trauma in the background there. He arrived in the U.S. when he was 6 years old, didn't speak the language. As he said, he was dragged up in the Bronx rather than growing up. And he decided that he was going to be a musician and would play the guitar 10 hours a day until his fingers bled, and went on to be hugely successful.
Right. So if you're just joining us in the show, just to reintroduce Deb, Deb Richards is with us, and she's been on a journey from moving from England from an early abusive marriage, and she left with her daughter, and she moved to Los Angeles, and she met her handsome and successful songwriter husband, Jake Hooker, who wrote the song I Love Rock and Roll, which is one of the greatest and biggest hits of all time. And she's here talking about that journey with her husband and also with her daughter through recovery. And she wrote her book, Shift and Shine, which is a book, it's like an inspiring story of hope and with tools to find a path through crippling adversity and emerge stronger and kinder. So if you're just joining us, that's what we're kind of talking about. I think, too, with people with talking about suicide, I think, not to be afraid to acknowledge the death, extending, if you know someone that has that, to extend your condolences or express your feelings of sorrow, and making sure you honor the loved one's name. I do think we need to have more like shrines, or not shrine, but like I saw a great 60 Minutes too, where they made this beautiful exhibit in Washington, D.C. for slaves, actually. And what they did is they took each big, huge metal square, and they hung them from the ceiling. So it was kind of symbolic of hanging, I guess. But then on each facet, they put a name of one of the slaves. And I thought, wouldn't that be powerful if we had something like that for people who've committed suicide?
It would be powerful.
It doesn't have to be that exact demonstration or artistic expression, but wouldn't it be powerful just to have a place and space? Because I do feel like it's important to honor each other.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And also to, if you have someone who's survived that or someone who's lost someone, to ask how you can help. Even if that person's not ready, to accept help, I think asking really signifies that we're there and not avoiding or distancing ourselves from a tragic event. And also, I think that can be very comforting. I also think encouraging openness, like we've been talking about, and being accepting of the need to express our feelings is really helpful because, and also some people might need silence, like you mentioned briefly, not briefly, but for a while afterward, you needed silence or with sadness or even anger. And also, I think patience and not setting a limit for grief, because I think grief actually...
There is no
limit.
And it comes in grief waves.
Exactly. Grief is kind of like a spiral that I think is within us for forever, and it's just how do we meet that? There's a beautiful book one of my professors wrote. It's called The Soul in Grief, and it's a very poetic book. His name's Robert Romanishin, and it talks about death, and his wife had a heart attack and died in his arms, and he ended up getting remarried and having another chapter in his life, but it was about that process, and it's very poetic. And I think everybody has a different kind of poetry. We're talking about Jonathan Livingston Seagull.
Mm-hmm.
And are you talking about the poem that he wrote about going home and putting a bullet? So if you're not familiar with him, he wrote a poem, you could look it up, Jonathan Livingston Seagull. It's kind of like it's like a very famous poem about a man going home and committing suicide, kind of, right? And also I just think listening is just so critical, and being a compassionate listener. That means like you don't have to look to fix things for people. I think the greatest gift we can give someone is just to show you care, and to provide reassurance and love, like you've been doing too, and you're spreading that. Deb, I was wondering, we just have time for a couple more questions. If there's someone listening who's interested in wanting, maybe they've had someone they've lost, or they don't know how to, move through recovery. How do you think someone could approach that topic from a healthy perspective? Like, do you have any recommendations of how, like, say somebody wants to write a book or somebody wants to get out there, and share their story?
I would say for me, when my daughter went into rehab, all of the rehabs had told me she has to come willingly. She has to want her recovery, which, of course, in a perfect world, they would want their recovery, but they don't because they're very happy being high on whatever drug of choice is theirs. So I finally found a rehab that said, we don't care what you do, knock her over the head, just get her into the reception, we'll take her. So it's looking around for those places for your loved ones.
Right.
If it's that dire and they need to go because they're out there and they exist.
And not giving up.
Not giving up. And always lending a hand for recovery.
Well, and recovery is kind of a constant. I think of it like a lifelong process,
Yes,
because
it is.
especially probably people have setbacks and they move forward. I mean, life is really about kind of expanding and contracting. So I think people who have more struggles sometimes, they do have setbacks. But I mean, we all have setbacks too.
My daughter actually relapsed after rehab, which is one of the hardest things that I'd ever had to deal with because being a type A personality back then, I thought, once she's gone to rehab, check that box.
Right.
She's healthy. Okay,
That's
on
how we
go.
live.
That's how we move. And so it caused me such dire pain that a dear friend suggested I go away to a camp to grieve for a couple of weeks. He said, if as you said, if you were having a heart attack or you had cancer, you would go and get it taken care of.
Go check go in the hospital or see a doctor.
I actually went to a place in Arizona, Cottonwood.
Oh, yeah.
One of the only places that has a program for parents to go and learn the tools they need to survive through their loved ones' addictions.
And Cottonwood is a big facility. I've had patients that have gone because they have the transitional hospital. Like they have, if you are looking for something like that, or someone that needs to go to somewhere like that, they can be quite expensive. But Cottonwood, I know, isn't that the one where it's kind of like you're on kind of like in hospital and you don't get to go outside as much, and then you kind of transition to more freedoms in a way, and you get to learn how to relive your life outside and go to coffee shops and gradually. But there's support groups, and I think it's a very great program, though. I've heard lots of positive things.
Well, hopefully they're introducing that to more programs because I think just 30 days is asinine. I mean, it's a start, but I think you need 90 days for it to even stand a chance.
Even what would be great is actually if they had, I remember when I worked, at the county, we were always hospitalizing people. Even though I'm certified to 5150, someone takes something against their own will, I only hospitalized like 2 people because I'd spend all day with the family figuring out what you did, just options and places. I think it'd be great if we had more partial hospitalizations and also if there was more maintenance, like post-care, like, once a month you go back and, you know what I mean? Would that be great?
I mean, I wrote my manifesto on the sober livings because I was so disgusted that you don't need a license to open up an 8-bed or less house.
Yeah.
And when I first walked in there, and this was costing me a great deal of money that I really didn't have, it was everybody laying around watching the TV instead of learning life skills that they desperately needed, because whatever age you start using it is usually where your mental
State is at.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well,
so I was appalled.
And also, so what you're saying is to really check out what the facility is, what the credentials are. Yeah, I've actually heard quite a few different stories in that regard, too. And I find sometimes people get shipped off, and I see, young adults or people that have had really horrible experiences, too, in those kind of places. So it's really important to find the right match, whether
Absolutely.
it's for you or someone you love.
Not somewhere that just babysits, but somewhere that gives them life skills, job
Tools.
skills, the tools. I wanted them to go and volunteer at different places, a well-rounded approach to a new life.
Right, because you need to have some coping skills. Otherwise, you'll just go right back to what you were doing.
Absolutely, which she did.
She did. And then
That's when she relapsed. She's been clean and sober for 10 years now. Yay!
Congratulations.
Happy.
Happy.
Happy mom.
That's a long time. So
That
good
is a
job.
long mom.
So it sounds like it paid off your hard work.
Yes, it did.
Sometimes by the end, I always think we have to front load things. It's like we have to do this initial amount of work. But people are like, oh, I don't want. But then what I notice is people do this backpedaling instead of front loading it, really getting in there and figuring out when it needs to be, you know what I mean? And then getting that established and sticking to that.
Well, and I think with having a relative or a child who's an addict, it's like anti-parenting. And it's so hard learning to do that, to let them reach their lowest low.
That's true. Well, I do think people need to reach that. It's true. Because otherwise it's like disingenuous. You know what I mean? Then they're just going through the motions.
Well, and I'm a rescuer, so my natural instinct was to rescue and to fix. And this was something that was much bigger than I was.
The thing is that we really can't fix another person. When patients come in and say, "Oh, I'm broken," or I need you to fix me," I say, I can't fix you, but I can teach you to respond or react more skillfully.
Yes, that's amazingly wonderful.
It's kind of like waves in the ocean, right? It's like, how do you meet the waves and before they become like a tsunami?
Yes.
or like the bathtub, like a vortex that sucks you in and you can't get out. But, I think people do need to hit a certain place so that it means something to them. It's true.
No, absolutely.
Whether it's suicide or drug abuse or whatever your struggle is, it has to be a very personal journey. Deb, I was wondering, have you heard of any campaigns or organizations in the suicide and recovery world that work specifically toward reducing mental health stigma?
Do you know, here I really haven't. So that's bad, isn't it?
No, well, it's just an idea.
I know,
that maybe...
maybe an idea for me. I know Kada does Danny's.
Right. I actually worked that was like my first traineeship. I worked at El Puente High School for Kada. Yep. Well, I think what Deb's talking about is every year the Daniel Bryant hike where Daniel Bryant, the Bryant and Sons jeweler, his son died of a heroin overdose a couple decades ago. So he has created this walk or hike.
I actually went on that this year.
Did you? Was that nice?
Yeah, it was lovely.
I just think there needs, I guess, like we were talking outside, there needs to be more, campaigns. Like even, I know a lot of people watch TV, and if we had somebody famous maybe that talks about it, or anybody just talking about, hey, this is the real kind of deal. Not like, this is a TV show and we just showed you the show. However, if you really are experiencing these things, you know what I mean? Wouldn't that be great?
That would be phenomenal.
Wouldn't that be phenomenal? And Michael Phelps, even, I was so happy. I saw him a couple months ago. He got on and he said, I go to therapy, and therapy is a great thing. If you need it, go. I'm so happy because it doesn't have to be therapy, but whatever it is, you know what I mean? If we were to destigmatize that.
I'm a believer in therapy since my time at the hospice.
Yes.
I think they saved my life, actually.
Well, it is. I mean, I think therapy, and as a psychologist, I have saved people's lives. It's a different thing. I'm not resuscitating them with handheld resuscitators, but there is, people reach critical mass and it can move in lots of different ways. I'm always trying to just imagine a world where each person has the opportunity toward, self-peace and through the ability to overcome these mental health barriers and obstacles to treatment. And it sounds like hospice did do a good job. So good job, hospice. Maybe I have time for just one or two more questions. I was wondering, how do you think, Deb, we could begin working toward acceptance of mental health and well-being?
I think by talking about it when children first go into school and explaining that we all come as different snowflakes, we all have different parts of us that make up the whole. I also think it would be really helpful to introduce the meditation for children.
We are doing that. Actually, our whole community is doing that.
That's so fantastic.
In fact, I go to my son's junior high and I taught all the staff and
Yay!
teachers. And I'm part of a group now. There's a group here where they're going into many of the elementary schools and the junior highs, and then they're going to start in the high schools. Just they've been getting a lot of grants for that.
Oh, that's
but I agree.
So wonderful.
Well, when I used to go, I used to spend all day Mondays, and I did this for about 8 years before this kind of happened. And I don't have as much time, so I don't spend all day Mondays. But when I talk to the little kids, even kindergartners, I'd say, this is a little gift I'm giving you, because if someone had taught me this is like really good, healthy for stress, and it can last you your whole life.
Your whole life.
You know what I mean? It's powerful.
And it's grounded, I think, in thankfulness and generosity to others.
Right.
Which, negates the cruelty that sometimes can come up in people.
Well, and also we become cruel toward ourselves. I like to have people even write down for 5 things they have gratitude for a day, and they found that after a month, it does shift your mindset. Just having some, like your level of appreciation, and then if we can just soften that and be more kind toward each other.
Through the years, I learned to shift my thought, which is actually a muscle that needs to be worked like any muscle.
Totally.
So I shift my thought when it goes to a dark place, and then I choose. I like to think that we all have a light bulb inside of us, and sometimes it's turned down dimly, but we have the power to turn it up to its megawatt most dazzling shine.
Totally. I mean,
So you shift that
It's true.
thought, and then you turn up your light bulb, and you shine.
that's where you got the book title.
Yes,
I love
shift
it.
and shine. That's
It's
because
true.
that's what I found myself doing.
Yes.
My
shifting and
thought
shining.
would go somewhere, and I go, oh, Deb, that's not very healthy. Let's bring that thought back over here. And I go, okay, let's turn that light bulb up to full wattage.
Nice.
And then you get out there into the world, and you shine at your fellow humans.
The Dalai Lama has been talking more recently, too, about that exact idea. It's like we are such believers in physical hygiene, but we don't care as much about our emotional hygiene. And we really do need to up that and turn that light up a
Yes,
little
we
bit more.
do.
And
Yes,
let
we
yourself
do.
shine in
And
all
as
your
you know,
glory.
you look at other humans, and I look at them, and I think, oh my God, they've all got such beautiful light bulbs.
Exactly. They're all different light bulbs.
All different light bulbs, but absolutely beautiful.
It's true. It's so true. I like that idea. Okay, I'm going to ask you one more question. I just think we need more programs, to kind of advocate for these different topics we're talking about. How do you think that suicide and recovery intersect within our community, and why is it important for us to talk about our mental health?
I think in our community, actually, if I'm understanding the question correctly, because of hospice being there, for people who are survivors of their loved one, then that's the place they should
And
certainly
also, just
get to.
I guess I was thinking how it impacts. We all, like you were talking earlier, how we all impact each other, right? And
The
so-
ripple effect of
the
it.
ripple effect. And so, I mean, I think it's important for us as a community not to feel like we're just here individually. We're all here collectively, too.
No, we're all collectively. I mean, another that you look at is just ourselves in another lampshade,
Yep.
as I like to think of it. So it's we are all most definitely connected to one another, and the more that we can come together with love for each other and the energy of love, the more beautiful it will be.
I agree completely. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Deb. Do you have any kind of final words of wisdom for our listeners?
Well, I don't know words of wisdom, but my email is Deborah, Deborah, Shines, SHINES, @gmail.com. And if you would like to have a conversation, please reach out to me. And if you're feeling less than, please know that you are so, so loved. And please reach out for help, because there are so many people that would just love to help lift you up.
Exactly. I agree completely.